Welcome to the Draftstars AFL show with Smatho and Roody.
With thanks to Daily Fantasy Rankings and to Draftstars, this is the Draftstars AFL show for round 16. Friday night footy action at Marvel Stadium between the Blues and the Saints. This is a bonus episode with thanks to DFR, your number one resource for DFS AFL. I'm Smatho, and Rudy's back for another episode. Thanks, Rudy, for joining by.
Thank you for having me, Smatho. Pleasure to be here. Is this our last double show of the year, Smatho? Or are there more Thursday night games?
Another Thursday next week. So I'm looking forward for more double header action. But the big question on everyone's lips from obviously our live stream from last night: how'd you pull up?
I'm okay. I was all right this morning. Had the breakfast of champions, a couple of hash browns from Macca's, and a Gatorade, and I was fine. Yep.
Fair enough. It was a big question from everyone's lips last night, so it's good to see that you're fighting fit. And we're going to be looking at the Friday night clash between the Blues, who are in a bit of form, and the Saints, who all of a sudden are out of form. So Friday night lights against the Saints. So this is going to be a very interesting matchup. $75,000 contest available on Draftstars, as always. Great AFL live final tickets also up for grabs, and a sneaky little live final ticket in the NRL too, between the Panthers on Friday night. So look out for that one. But Rudy, let's get straight into the slate. $75,000. We're at Marvel Stadium. It's a 7:50 p.m. start. Team news. Now, I haven't brought up the team news as of yet. Any changes that come up from the teams on Thursday night for this particular match?
Yeah, so St Kilda have gone whack, whack, whack after their shocking performance last week. And to be honest, some of the players they've dropped wouldn't be the ones that I would have dropped, but out goes Long, Patton, Sharman, Joyce, and Burns, all omitted. I can't remember the last time I saw so many players actually omitted. Rather, there's usually a few injuries. So they've gone whack, whack, whack. In comes Hill, Higgins, Wood, and Ryder. Obviously, the most important thing to note there is Ryder coming in, which automatically drops the value of the ruck, Rowan Marshall. And that's a shame because rucks are hard in this contest, as we'll see in a few moments' time. So that's the main one to talk about, Ryder and Marshall. They're amazing together, in a footy sense, but fantasy sense, no, not at all. And then Brad Hill comes back to that halfback role. We'll talk about the implications of that a little bit later too. And Higgins, the St Kilda kind of small forwards, kind of very similar for me. Higgins is probably the best of them, so that's notable as well. Over the other side for Carlton, in comes Chera, back into the side after a couple of weeks off with an injury. I don't think there's too much to say in terms of the impact of that one. Maybe a little bit less keen on some of those Carlton cheaper half-forward wing types, but we'll get into that later on. So the biggest takeaway for the team news is the Marshall-Ryder impact, and there are some other things we'll get into when we discuss the positions.
One thing I caught during the week, I'm not sure it was on Footy Classified or on 360, but Sammy Walsh, he's not exactly in the middle. He's more like a 60-40 now. He was like pure mid in the guts, but now they played him around half forward, and like they were saying that the Saints need to put a bit of work into him. So with Chera coming back in, that kind of galvanizes that kind of hot take that they produced this week.
Well, it depends on the role that Chera plays, because Chera himself is not really a bona fide midfielder. So maybe Walsh goes back into the midfield a little bit. Regardless, I think Walsh is in the kind of form when it just is the player that his role will change week to week. He's so good that he's such a good inside and outside player. He can do the Zach Merritt play, where he plays a little bit behind the ball. He can go half forward. He can kick goals himself. He can really do it all. So I'm not too interested in any kind of, they really do try as hard as they can to find trends that don't exist in those shows.
Fair enough. That caught my eye. So I was just like, that's interesting. Let's talk about rucks though. 4 rucks are available on this particular slate, starting with Rowan Marshall at 12,260. Paddy Ryder's there at 9,750 after his little break. They're going up against Jack Silvani, who's at 11,220, and Tom DeConing at 9,740. As you alluded to before, if it was a Rowan Marshall by himself, giddy up. That 12,200 price seems to be very, very delicious, as somewhat people say. But you might have to have second thoughts with Ryder back.
Yeah, definitely. And you might immediately say, well, okay, there's a bit of a contrarian play there because everyone will be scared off Marshall. So that means he becomes a better play. Sure, go for it. No worries. The only thing is it's an expensive slate, this one. So you really want to be careful. But just go through, the with without stats. It's clear as day that Marshall's ceiling is lower when Ryder is around. So can you really get the benefit of Marshall getting an 80 at, is he close to 30,000? I just don't think it's there for me. But the only really other thing to talk about is that the ceilings of the other options just aren't that good. Like Silvani, I really like as a player, but 11,000 is just, again, like as a ruck, I actually don't mind the play itself because he's just more involved in the game. There's more avenues to score points than the three other options. But just the sacrifices for the salary that you have to make, I'm just not sure that it will pay off, which leads me to Tom DeConing. Again, just lock in the 9.7 and hope that he gets a 60, 70, move on. Don't overthink it. I definitely think that, TDK, but you could probably say the same thing for Paddy Ryder, who's the same price. He's going to get his 20, 25 hit outs, maybe 5, 10 possessions, and then he gets close to value. Well, not close to value, but close to the 60, 70. So they're all in play. They're ugly rucks. Don't overthink it. Just go for what you think first and don't try and find patterns that aren't there.
Yep. Fair enough. Defense. Now, obviously, if you look at the tools here on the dailyfantasyrankings.com.au, you can see that the Saints do give up fantasy points to opposition backs, especially the premium backs. And that means it is a great matchup for Sam Doherty at 16,090. Look at those scores there, 121, 129, 135 in his last three. I don't see anything changes here, Roody.
No, me neither. My first thought was, can I get a Doherty Sard team to work? That's the first thing I went to, just because Sard's been in really, really good form. He hasn't smashed through the 100 barrier yet. So you might say, he's a bit too expensive. But really, if you're looking to capitalize on this matchup, which it's the second best matchup in the league next to Melbourne, you go for it. So, the Saints, this is the one thing we kind of brushed over, Smatho, was the importance of this game in terms of the finals. Carlton, I know you're a Blues man, so I'll do the talking about Carlton so you're not biased, but I am smelling something. I am smelling what they're cooking. They're the real deal, line to line, they're a bloody good football team, They do need things to go right. But similar to Melbourne last year, their role players are doing really well at the moment. And so, there's a lot being asked of Cottrell, O'Brien, even Zach Fisher, who's not really a role player, but you know what I mean? So the Saints, they'll be really desperate. They have to win this game to stay in the hunt. But all things for me, my first lineup was an 8-1 Carlton stack. Let's just say that. Yeah. So anyway, I was getting off the point. Doherty, Sard, my main options. A bit of Newman, just because I don't think many people will go to him. And some people might not want to pay all the way up for Doherty. They might want to focus on their midfields. But I'm going, Doherty. I'll do my best to get him in my team for tonight.
In terms of the rest of the Carlton defence, we do have Lewis Young, Lockie Plowman, and Brody Kemp. Brody Kemp's an interesting one, just at the flat 6K, coming off a 72 last week, which involved 8 marks and 17 possessions with a tackle there. So plug and play value, or are we missing out on these kind of key guys up the top here if we do plug in Kemp?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like I just said about Sard, you are still spending 11K for about a 90 return, which isn't amazing, to be honest. Now, Brody Kemp, I'm pretty sure I've got the right guy here. There was a lot of hype over Brody Kemp when he was first drafted, really that classic utility kind of player. And he's come into the defence with Carlton's injury woes. Smatho, I don't know whether he ends up as a defender for most of his career, but I'm more than happy to plug and play, especially because it does let me get to Doherty quite not easily, but it does make it easier to get to Doherty.
All right. Let's have a look at the Saints. Sinclair leads the brigade there at 14,610. So Brad Hill's back at 11.6. He can be a bit of a yo-yo fantasy scorer there. You can get some stinkers like a 36 and a 32, but then obviously you can get some real good ceiling scores. At Marvel, do you think Carlton will let him do what he wants to do here?
I don't think they put any work into him like the Swans did last week. Feel bad for Ryan Clark, by the way. He just got dropped this week, kicked 2 goals, and he kept Sinclair to whatever. Sinclair had no impact on the game, and then the lad gets dropped. That's rough. But no, I don't think they put any work into Sinclair. Hill, I think they just go, okay, get your cheapy stats on the back line, and that's it. I'm not as keen as Brad Hill as I have been in the past, to be honest. I'm not that keen in any of these Saints defenders. I just think that the returns just aren't there for me. Hunter Clark, until he's unleashed in the midfield, if he'll ever be unleashed in the midfield, is a no for me. Wilkie, I really like his role this year. Webster, no, in terms of fantasy production. So, yeah, there aren't many Saints defenders that really jump out at me, especially because this is such a clear matchup bonus that, yes, okay, the whole field is going to be chasing the points here for the matchup, but it's there. It's not like we are a long way into the season now. The data matters, and it's all pointing to stack the Carlton backline.
All right. More the same in the midfield now. 17,070 for Jack Steele. Also, his return from injury was pretty successful there with 124. So he leads the Slater at 17K. Around a $1,400 difference down to Sammy Walsh that was just mentioned before. He's in ripping form as well at 120. Below him, Brad Crouch, 15,070. His number suggests that 15K looks like a little bit too expensive for my liking. And then we go the Hewitt, Cripps, Kennedy, Chera, engine guts for the Blues. They're all above or around that $14,000 mark. So your thoughts here, Roody, on these top kind of 6 or 7 players on the slate here?
Yeah, Jack Steele, love his ceiling. I've loved this kid from when he was running around in the NEAFL, doing ridiculous things in the NEAFL. Couldn't crack into that initial Giants midfield and then has just brought his NEAFL skills all his career. So I love him to bits. Bit too expensive for me on a night like this. He's a full 1.5 more than Sammy Walsh, with really a pretty similar return or a similar ceiling, I guess. So Sammy Walsh is the one that I'm going for here. He's in great form. If I'm targeting one of the expensive guys, it's going to be Walsh. Crouch has been underrated. He's hasn't quite been consistent as he was early in the season. If you go back a little bit, he had a really good run. And then, gosh, it comes the blanket players, throw a blanket over him. Hewitt, Cripps, Kennedy, as we've spoken about. I feel like we've spoken about Carlton quite a lot this year, Smatho. It really is quite difficult to sometimes predict which one of them is going to go large. Interesting that Chera comes back for the first time in a while. How does that change things in the midfield? Like I said, I don't think it changes things very much at all. He'll be that 4th, 5th mid rather than the key 3. So I don't think it'll impact on the centre bounces of anyone. If it does, it'll probably be someone like Georgie Hewitt who maybe goes to a tap back to a moderate tagging role. I don't think they'll ever fully throw George Hewitt back into a full-time tagging role. I think he tagged a little bit last week. So you could go Georgie Hewitt onto Jack Steele, and then that would take them both out of the equation for me. But what I really want... Oh, sorry, you about to say something?
Oh, just going to say, now I'm going to start here on the Saints mids outside of Crouch and Clark. You've got some cheaper options below 13K and Gresham, Ross, Jones and Billings. Obviously, Seb Ross is going to pop everywhere if you're using a cruncher, the fantasy insider cruncher. If you line up some value against his score, he's going to pop for you. So 12, 8, 40, tournament play, you got to have him, or tournament play, let's fade him and hopefully he reduces one of these stinkers that he had earlier this year.
You know what? I don't think he's a fade or a got to have. His ownership will be around the 40, 45 probably. I don't think it'll be much more than that. Let's like his last week, of course, I think he was in the winning lineup, but it's not like he's bankable 100 plus. I mean, we've only had 2 in the last kind of 8 weeks or so, and it was at 3 or so for all season. So don't expect last week's efforts again tonight or tomorrow night, sorry. But yeah, he is, especially if you're going Carlton heavy, someone who can easily run back with, especially when the options are like Jones and Billings. Jones, he did have a really good period of time last year where he had some massive scores, but he doesn't look like he's near that form. So instead, I'm going to guys like Wanganeen Millera was someone who originally popped out to me. And then I thought to myself, hang on, he has been in good form, but Hill has been missing, or he was missing last week. Millera is actually someone I'm going to try to squeeze into my forward line. We'll get there in a little bit. But I also like these 10 to 9K Carlton players. People like Lockie O'Brien, Jack Nunes, Zach Fisher, just because I'm banking on a big Carlton win. And when Carlton win, these players always score well. Nunes gets a revenge game. O'Brien has been in really, really good form on a wing as well. Does Chera's return affect that? Yeah, probably does a little bit, but not too significantly that I'm really scared about it. So I don't mind going for, and Cottrell's the other guy. So I don't mind going for 2 of Nunes, O'Brien, and Cottrell in my midfield. So that'll allow me basically to get to Doherty and Walsh in the same lineup. If you go down to Cottrell, there's quite a lot that really does open things up. If you've taken the team that I've suggested so far. Anyone that I've glossed over, Windhager. What are your thoughts on him? He had a good return last week after a few 40s and 30s. Are you going back to Marcus Windhager?
If you're desperate, especially for our last forward line pick at 6,070, sure. As I said, we talk about how for our mate down here in Brody Camp, if you plug him in, you get your 50, 60, then that's fine. So I prefer to get to, say, Cottrells and etc. But if you don't, there's no harm in playing Marcus. Let's have a look at the rest of the forwards. Obviously led by a few of the blokes we've already talked about in Gresham, Marshall, and Billings. Charlie Curnow is there at 11,510. He seems to be waiting for a breakout game. He is kicking goals, just not really getting it done with the old kicks and possessions and handball. So I think that's a little bit too much, unless he absolutely kicks a bag and breaks the slate for you. That'd be fantastic. Harry Mackay's at 10,860. Again, like his partner, gets the goals, but just doesn't really have that contribution in possessions around the ground. Tim Membry, I reckon he's fallen off a little bit there. You usually expect like the 80s and 90s for Membry, but back-to-back 50s there means that in a bad, I wouldn't say a bad matchup, because also Carlton's backline is a little bit thin, but being the underdogs here at 10,440, again, it's another really tournament play. So any of these guys above here at 10K, you're really looking at if you do have the cash here?
It's a tough one. Again, Jay Gresham, I really do like Gresham. So I wouldn't call him a pivot off Ross, but he's someone who I don't think will be as highly owned as he probably should be. Marshall was spoken about. Billings, we glossed over a little bit in the midfield. He has been okay since he's come back. Billings, the outside game suits him, and I think there will be some outside ball for him to get. Curnow and Mackay, I like playing these guys as tournament plays, just because if you do get onto the right side of a Curnow 10-mark, 5-goal game, like he could win you the slate just like that. But again, if you haven't played Fisher yet, you could throw him in. The St Kilda forwards, I'm going to largely gloss over just because I don't think they win. I don't think the upside is there. And then we've got some 6K Carlton players. Durden, who has been, I think he got to value twice, but then has been pretty rubbish in the other games. Honey, we haven't seen him much this year. Thoughts on Honey from an insider perspective there, Smatho?
Second up, as they say in the racing terms, better for the run from last week. If he keeps his forward pressure, more tackles, get on the scoreboard, then a 50-55. You'll take that. Jesse Motlop, who was also late in last week, toiled well for his 40, 5 tackles. That's what we want from the guy. But again, if you can hit the scoreboard and get a few more kicks than that, then they're gonna serve your purpose there. So that's 4 6K guys now that you could sprinkle in if you're playing multiple lineups. I wouldn't be going heavy on any of the 4. I reckon you'd just be sprinkling these guys.
Yeah, it's actually the rucks and the forwards, I think I found the hardest to settle on for this slate. I really hate all the ruck options, and I don't really like the forwards much either, too, to be honest. So it's going to be interesting to see how other people approach this game. I've just got one eye on the Lions Bulldogs game at the moment, and it looks like a very low fantasy scoring game so far, Smatho. So interesting, and a lot of the field were on our boy Josh Shackey, who has returned to his pumpkin self and is going to let down a lot of people tonight.
Oh, what a world we live in. What a world. All right, let's pump out your side. Obviously, you're not too keen on your forwards and your ruckman here. I'm sure your midfield's looking fantastic, but let's get through your team for Friday night.
Cool. All right. So, of course, you know what I've been doing while we've been talking, Smatho. What have I been doing? No, I haven't been to qualify that statement, right? I actually hadn't settled on a team yet before we started talking.
Right.
And I did take a screenshot of one that I probably will roll with. So let me just get out the old phone and here we go. Is that what I'm happy with? No, we'll see. All right, let's start from the ruck. Put in TDK, please. Let's put in TDK. Back to the world for me, him. And then I have indeed gone what I think will be a quite popular pairing of Brody Kemp and Sam Doherty. Tried to make the Sard Doherty work, but and to be, I'll just pause for a second. If you now went with throw in Miller or Wanganeen Miller into your forward line.
Where is he? There he is. 8,000.
Yep. And then that actually gives you, and then you can really do quite an even team from there on in. You can throw in a Cottrell into your midfield, and then you can go for a Nunes, Ross, O'Brien, Assad will work there. So I actually don't mind that kind of lineup that, we call it the Roody. So if you throw in Assad, and I'll take out Sam Walsh from that team on my screen here, put in NWM, and then I'm also going to plug in Zach Fisher, and then I've got enough to get to Gresham. So let me read you out this team for a second, Smatho. So this is not my team, but I actually don't mind it. So I've got TDK, Sard Doherty. I've got let's call him Messiah. I've got Messiah, got Fisher, and then my midfield becomes Cottrell, Ross, O'Brien, and Gresham.
There we go. $40 left.
Or Nunes, So I actually don't mind that. It's a little bit different. Definitely will be quite unique. I don't mind that one. So that's one option. If you just clear the screen there, Smatho. Clear the lineup. Yep. And let's go for TDK, Doherty, and Kemp. Cool. And let's go to the forward line first. To mix things up a bit.
Go ahead.
And I'll read you this one. Fisher and Mackay, please.
Yep. So that leaves you 11,700 per play in your mids.
Yep, and then I've got Nunes, Walsh, Ross, and Cottrell.
There we go. So that leaves you
Yeah, so
290.
that was the 8-1 stack that I was talking about earlier. Mackay, was tossing up about whether I could fit someone else in him. What I could do here is I actually, I think I can switch things around and get one of them back into my midfield or whatever. But yeah, I sometimes I think about these games where I'm just so convinced that one team's going to win. And then I'm like, of course St Kilda stacks are going to win. You know, that's how old mate Roody wins a lot of slates. He's very, very heavy on the underdogs from a game script point of view, is what makes him such a good DFS player. But yeah, I think Carlton are going to win. They're going to make this is a big game for both teams, but Carlton are the one in form. And Saints, #Saints football, as I've thought for a number of years, they are nowhere near where their supporters think they are.
Yeah. All right, Rudy. Well, thank you very much for your insights for this particular game, the Blues and the Saints, Friday night. We'll be back for the live stream next Wednesday night for the Cats and the Demons down at GMHBA Stadium. So I'm looking forward to your insights for that particular game.
I've already got one. Fade
Tom
Stewart. Fade Tom Stewart next week.
I think he's out.
Is he? What happened?
Wow. Make sure you flick us a like on the way out of this particular episode. Thank you very much to our viewers this week. Good luck for your Draftstars teams this week. I'll have some more news next week in terms of what's happening with the live final. Hopefully we've got a little bit of an announcement, so stay tuned for that. If not, thanks very much, guys, and we'll catch you next Wednesday on the Draftstars AFL show. Thanks, Rudy.
Thanks, mate. See ya.